I was at the State House and thought I'd stay, but
We're live.
Okay, great. All right, we got 4. Okay, so the goal would be to welcome back everybody, including the public. The goal would be to vote S210 out today, but I'm not naive enough to know that those things don't generally go according to plan. But what I'd like to do is I've asked David to take S210 and at least go through the significant changes in S210 from what was vetoed by the governor. It's no secret that this bill is very similar to S79 with trying to make some, but not all accommodations to the governor's concern. And it probably will change some more as it moves through the House. But we'd like to get this started and get a second chance at this issue that's been around for at least 4 years and according to some for decades. So David, if you wouldn't mind pulling up on the screen the version that has yellow highlights with the changes from the vetoed bill.
Sure. Are you seeing S210 as introduced?
Yes.
Yes, and it's on our committee website also.
So what you have on your screen right now is literally the bill as introduced. And what I'm gonna, Senator Sorokin has asked me to just take you back through it. And I have highlighted in yellow just those pieces that are significant, that are different from S79. I mean, none of it is significantly different, but there are differences. So let's see. So, it's not a substantive difference in any way. I did want to just remind you that the construct is different in that rather than overlaying the housing stuff into the current fire safety chapter, we're actually just going to create a new chapter for rental housing, health and safety inspections and registrations. So that's not a big deal, but it's a difference. The subject matter is the same. Remember, this is all relating to the inspection piece, the jurisdiction of DPS. So this does include, what we define as premises in the landlord tenant law and short-term rentals as we define them in Title 18. So, the authority to adopt rules, that's the same as in S79. In your bill here in 210 B1 does explicitly say that, the adoption of rules and the system that will be designed and implemented pursuant to it is a complaint-driven system to conduct inspections of rental housing. So that was not explicit in S79. It is explicit here that it would be a complaint-driven system.
And that's fine. That's what we wanted, I think, always intended. But that doesn't change, nothing here changes fire safety's responsibility for inspections vis-a-vis electrical systems, smoke detectors, all of the stuff that they deal with. They operate under a complaint-driven system, but there's no law vis-a-vis those kinds of inspections, such as now that we're carving out here for health, where we say specifically it should be complaint-driven.
Right.
Okay.
And, in those other contexts, they do inspections, for instance, in new constructions or substantial renovations where, for instance, they have to check to see if your smoke detectors are hardwired. That's not necessarily complaint-based, but
Right.
in this context, absolutely, this would be a complaint-driven system. And the complaint could come from anywhere. I mean, it could be a landlord, it could be a tenant, it could be a neighbor, but that's the nature of the beast.
Well, and to that point, David, I have had several landlords with very challenging tenants, and they need an avenue for complaint and help also. So I think that's a fair point.
Sure. And I do think, we had this conversation, this next piece in 2, which is this is the language that's brought over from the local health code that you guys added a few years back. There was conversation at the time about, is this only against the landlord? Could this be against the tenant? And the answer is yes, it could be against the tenant if the tenant is causing the harm and is the one responsible for correcting, the deficiency. That that can play out a lot of ways in the real world, but anyway. So on page 4 of 26, the penalty construct here is different than S79. S79 just used the machinery of what was already in the underlying law, and it did provide for and contemplate a higher maximum penalty, and there was no language that, as you have in line 4 here, that said the penalty needed to be reasonably related to the severity of the violation, and it's not to exceed 1,000 per violation. So that's different than S79. That's different than the existing law in the fire safety chapter, which is more severe.
This is again one of the issues raised by the governor in his letter, essentially saying the penalty should fit the crime, and it wasn't, even though we had heard in practice, fire safety had never abused that, and this prosecutorial discretion, it wasn't clearly or wasn't tightly written that way. So theoretically, there could have been a severe penalty for a minor violation, but this is how we try to address the governor's concerns. This has been out there for a while. I've heard no feedback from the administration that this is not sufficient. So let's move on.
So, the registration piece, as far as the $35 fee, the nature of the information, those are all consistent with S79. Largely, the exceptions are the same. There, excuse me, there are some differences here below on page 7. So, again, the licensed lodging establishment gets a specific and express exclusion. The owner-occupied residence is new to this relative to S79. The non-winterized seasonal units is a new concept relative to S79. I don't know if, Senator, you want to address anything else here.
Well, this is again, the governor was talking about small operations and camps. We thought we had excluded camps. So this is an attempt to reduce in some ways the reach of the registry, but the fact is that I don't think in terms of this bill that these were really the primary, the kinds of units that were of primary concern to us. So we're trying to reach a place that maybe perhaps will make a difference in terms of getting this enacted and signed.
All right. So this is all functioning the same, consistent with S79 safety fund, the delayed penalty. This is the same as S79. We know we talked about this the other day. Stop me if you have questions, but otherwise I'm going to keep moving.
I just want to point out Amy Spear, and I don't have it immediately in front of me, pointed out that some of the towns and cities that do have registries do have higher penalties for failure to register and other penalties, which if people are interested, we can explore.
I hadn't thought about this, but in response to that question, there can be differences between local penalties and state penalties because they're different registration systems, correct?
Correct.
Correct, okay.
But
No, there's no preemption laws like there are with the federal government, okay.
Let's see. So this is all the same as 79. In fact, I believe that is it. Yep.
Okay, so we've all seen Senator Brock's amendment as written. I don't know if he has any changes. So and we'll get to that, but I have an amendment that's pretty straightforward that I'd like to present to the committee or have David present to the committee. It's fairly short. It deals with exemptions mostly and the funding for the 2 new programs.
Just 1 second here. So I just sent that to all of you and to Scott, and I'm gonna pull it up on the screen.
can we
here.
post
It, yes.
can we post it so that we can
All right. So right now, this is what I sometimes call the surgical format, where we're making discrete changes within the bill as it was introduced. So it ends up being 4 instances of amendment just because the changes have to happen in a few different places. And however you want to proceed with that is up to you, obviously. The first 2 instances of amendment go to the exclusion from registration and fee requirement for, properties that are rented for fewer than X days. In this case, it's 90 days. So the registration and fee requirements imposed in subsection A do not apply to a unit that is rented for fewer than 90 days per calendar year. So again, this is the registration and fee requirement that relates to the registry itself. This does not have anything to do with whether these units are subject to the public safety jurisdiction for purposes of inspections, etc. This is the duty to register the property and pay the fee to DHCD. And this slots in at the end of the list of exclusions.
So the governor had said 120 days in this context. We started to get pushback from the business community and the chambers of commerce saying, and this is an attempt to appease the governor in some ways. I mean, I think all of these frankly should be registered like in S79. This will mostly affect short-term rentals, and we need that data to do proper planning for housing. But in an effort to get this into law, this is sort of a compromise position. Doesn't affect inspections, but it does affect. It does say that a really short-term rental of no more than 90 days in a year can be exempt. Keep in mind, again, it's kind of ironic because we've dealt with short-term rentals and we passed laws in the past that require every single short-term rental to pay rooms and meals tax, to register with the Department of Taxes already. This information, if people are following the law, already exists. We just can't get it into the agency that needs to do the planning around housing and send out notices, send out thing. It's in the tax department. And so this is an attempt to try and get that in this bill in a position where it can potentially get signed.
Mr. Chair, what I'm just thinking, no fewer than 90 days. Do those need to be consecutive days? I mean, because quite frankly, that would help with the short-term rental. If we said consecutive days, it would, because 90 days could be, all 52 weekends a year. A short-term rental could just be doing every weekend. And it just does strike me that we do need the word consecutive on the 90 days, just so that we know that it's 3 months at a time.
I will leave that decision to the committee. I think to the extent that the 90 days is trying to meet the governor part of the way, I don't think he had it as 120 consecutive days. So if you put consecutive, you just move further away from the governor's position, and it might not matter because it might result in the bill not passing. So
Sean is here, and maybe Sean could weigh in on that. I think, because I do think the governor's intent was to get at what we've tried to identify here, which is exempting seasonal rentals, and that would be consecutive days. Sean, do you have a thought?
I am. Good morning, everyone. Sean Gilpin, Department of Housing and Community Development, for the record. We've the governor's office hasn't weighed in on these amendments, so I don't want to get too out over my skis. I think the intention of the 120-day exemption that was proposed was to exempt units that would not otherwise be available for a long-term rental situation. So I think the example that you gave, Senator Clarkson, of somebody who rents out perhaps their primary residence every weekend would not otherwise be renting that out on a long-term basis. And I think the governor's office feels that they should be exempted. So the consecutive days limits that exemption pretty dramatically. It's a pretty substantial change.
On the other hand, it does get, if what you're interested in is data, we're interested in data, that it would include more short-term rentals and less the seasonal, small operations, which you had thought to exclude. And I'm not sure you had thought to exclude a business that was operating every weekend.
I'd have to let them weigh in on what the intention of the exclusion is.
So I'm willing. I mean, the committee can override me on this. I feel like, Sean has said the administration has not had a chance to weigh in on this. Well, I understand that thoroughly. They had a chance last year to weigh in, and they didn't. And that I don't think the governor's style is to say anything for sure until such time as the bill gets to his desk. So I don't think we'll ever know, but this bill does have another stop in the House where they can dissect this particular section. I think we should try, at least we're going from 120 to 90 days. I think we should just leave it at the paradigm of not saying whether it has to be consecutive or not. So that would be my position. Does anybody else want to weigh in on that? And it's a little odd because we haven't voted, we're not voting on this amendment per se, but I'm willing to change to add the consecutive if that's what other people feel. It would not be my first choice at this point. Even though Allison, I agree with you on the merits of it, I'm thinking more of the politics of it.
Well, you have two other, but Randy weighed in, and you need to hear from Becca and Keisha. So I have stated my piece. I think I'm a merits kind of girl, so I'm going to stick with my feeling, because I mean, what we need desperately for this state needs this data, and these are businesses. This is, I'd love to look at the similar exemptions for businesses. We don't exempt businesses just because they're small in scale. If so, we'd be exempting most of the business in Vermont.
Okay, so I agree that the state needs this data. We also need this bill to be signed. So that's the choice. In my mind.
So the question is, Mr. Chair, is that too much of a give? That's really,
Yeah.
we've
and
been trying to do this for so long.
Right. So any feelings, but it's probably not going to be a huge deal anyway, and the House probably have better information to change it along the way, but let's get not too stuck. One of you two at the bottom of my screen, just vote for consecutive in or consecutive out.
Let's get it. Let's keep it moving.
That means
I think that means out.
Means
Okay.
out. You can
Let's
move
move
it.
on to the next issue, David.
Can I'd love to weigh in actually, Mr.
Okay,
Chair.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So, I mean, not only am I with you on the principle that it would be really great to get the infrastructure going to start to understand where rentals are across the state, and just get the data moving. I think it's important to note that a lot of short-term rentals can be 3 months in a season where it's hard to get vacationers, and weekends, in the summer or in ski season. I think we're still going to capture a lot of valuable data from having consecutive out. So, I think this is a very good start, and I am sort of listening and paying attention, and just wanted to weigh in because I really do want to find a good landing spot with the administration. And I hear you loud and clear that if we don't know where they stand on something, that could surprise us in a way that we're set back another year on this.
And if this does become law, I think there's going to be a future bill on short-term
Exactly.
rentals anyhow, where we look at the whole issue, and this may get tighter in the next iteration. And it may get tighter as it goes through the process as well. So let's move on, David. You're muted. You still may be muted.
I am muted. I was talking to myself. I want to make sure I have the right
Okay.
document when I go back to share mode. Looks like you're seeing your amendment still, yes?
Yes, and you sent it to us, which is even easier.
The second instance just has to renumber that list in light of the addition. So the third instance of amendment introduces into this bill appropriations for the Vermont Rental Housing Investment Program. So right now, the way this is put together, there's an FY22 appropriation, which would take effect on passage. And then there's an FY23 appropriation that would take effect on July 1st. And the numbers are just sort of placeholders. It's the construct that I think you wanted to discuss. So that's what's happening here, adding 2 new sections. This should actually say 20. Again, so we're in FY22 now, obviously, so that's the smaller amount, and FY23, which begins in July, is the larger amount. And they are both tied to implementing, the program created in this act. And then the last instance of amendment, just to launch off, is the accounting for those new sections and making sure all of the effective dates are accurate. So there you go. I'll leave it with that.
Okay, so on section 14A, there's already been $5 million did you take out altogether oh, no, let me just ask it. On 14A, it's already been $5 million allocated
Yeah, I don't
pro-
get
to a
14.
program named VHIP, which exists pretty much in title only at this point. Is this an additional $1 million, or is this basically the placeholder that appropriations will have to figure out what to put in there?
I mean, this would be additional money. Any money previously appropriated to the department for
Okay,
whatever its program is that it's doing is not this. And this
Okay.
is this program, and it is $1 million for this program.
So
Okay.
I guess I don't understand, given, I don't know why we need 14A, given that we have 14B. Oh, I see. It's for fiscal year 22, which is the year we're in now.
Yeah,
So
we
that
want-
gives them the money to spend immediately through June 30th.
let me ask Sean a question. What would be your best guess as to how much money you would put out the door in, let's say, the Budget Adjustment Act or this act passed at the end of February? You have 4 more months to spend money. What would be a fair number that would get you through the year and still cooking? I mean, I think it doesn't have to be constructed, but I think it has to go out, it has to be committed to these nonprofits in fiscal year 22. What would be, in your best guess, a fair number?
It's a little difficult for me to say without conferring with the homeownership centers, and it depends a bit on whether we maintain that the homeless service requirement, or if we relax those, how much interest there'll be. I think we put out, let's see, from September, October, November, December. So that was 4 months of CARES Act, and we put out 7 million. That was fully obligated. It ultimately, because of the extension, we relaxed things a little bit. It didn't get used quite that quickly, but it was obligated. I think it's reasonable to say that we could do that again in 4 months with the interest that's out there. So if this is an additional $1 million on top of the 5 that we already have in hand, it'd be pretty close to, I think, what we could reasonably put out. It's always, especially with Section 14B, not to get ahead, I think that's pretty critical for us to make sure that we know that there's an ongoing stream of funds going to this program, so that the homeownership centers can appropriately staff for a multi-year, multi-million-dollar program.
Okay, so I'm going to suggest that, sorry,
Mr. Chair.
Senator Clarkson, go ahead.
So in that section 14B, the one thing that's missing is multi-year. The expectation is that in fiscal year 23, they're going to spend this. And actually what Sean just said reminded me that their expectation here is to spend this through 25. And I think that ought to be added.
And forgive me if I could jump in. The expectation is that if, assuming this is ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act funds, which I recognize the language is a little bit more general. So if we were to receive, theoretically, if Build Back Better or some other federal source comes in that is still listed under coronavirus relief, there could be a discussion about whether that's a better source. But the American Rescue Plan Act funds are able to be spent through 2025, or I believe it's September 30, 2025. We likely wouldn't, I don't foresee us spending 20 million in a single year, but I think we could easily spend it before 2025. So the expectation would be to spend those funds, frankly, as quickly as we can to bring units online in short order. But I recognize that there's some logistical and physical limitations to doing that.
And the expectation is that it's multi-year.
Yes.
So I think we ought to say that. We don't need to say 25, but we could say a multi-year appropriation.
This does not have to be a very difficult
Right.
decision. I think that you're right, Senator Clarkson. At the very least, it needs to be multi-year. But I'm going to suggest that we raise that 1 million to 2 million just to be conservative in terms of what I don't know if conservative is the right word, but Sean said they could easily spend $7 million, I think.
Yeah, I think
Just to
that's
give them a
good.
cushion for this fiscal year 22. And I would have the $20 million and just appropriate for FY 23 at this point. This bill is going to go to appropriation. That's their decision whether they want to do a multi-year thing, but we don't even have parameters for the program yet. And I'd like to see it roll out for another year. And I don't quite fully accept that we need to commit ourselves to another $10 million right now because we have to be concerned with the staffing of the nonprofits. They need to know 3 years down the line that they're going to have a job to roll this money. I think it goes against my feeling of this program, at least at this point, that we have to make a multi-year commitment. So I would change the first one to 2 million and I would change the second one to 10 million and let it appropriations figure it out from there.
Great. I'd support that. That's a good idea.
David, going back to the part of the bill about primary residence and those homes, duplexes or triplexes being exempt, is
Yeah.
that in this version of the bill? I just want to make sure that that exemption's also there.
Yes, it's in the bill as introduced.
Okay.
Can you just show us what section it's in? I just I wasn't able to pull it up quickly.
Yeah, if you look at the bill as introduced, it's on page 7. It's in subdivision 5.
Can you just read that language to us, David? Oh, there it is. Okay.
Page 7. Line. Yeah, unit 6. Yeah, got it.
Okay. Great. I'm all good. It sounds like if we go with my amendment, we've fleshed that out. Well, let's move on to Senator Brock's concerns in his email and also whether he wants to revisit the go to the town health officer first, and then if they don't respond, then go to the fire safety amendment. Senator Brock, it's yours.
Sure. One of the major objections that the governor, I think, had was the increase in staffing in DPS that would follow it. H210 does address that by providing more of a gradual approach. My only question is that transition enough to satisfy the governor's objection? He had raised in his veto message the notion of, in effect, a transitional situation in which you moved from the town health officer in a 2-step phase, which is what the amendment that I had proposed did. That said, it was not an amendment that the body was accepting of. And my only question that I raise now is if it were necessary to take an approach like that in which we kept the existing system, and we understand that in those towns that do in fact have their own rental registries, it is in effect the town that does that. Is that something that this committee would be accepting of? Or do you believe that what you've done is sufficient to satisfy the governor's objection? And that's all I'm raising at this point.
Fair enough. I just, when the word transitional kept coming up, it did pique my interest. I mean, if there was a need for a year to get to where we wanted to get, and we needed some transitional time period, that made sense to me. What I can't accept is we don't ultimately wind up with a system that's professional in nature, or we have a helter-skelter or a hybrid model kind of thing where some towns have good town health officers and others don't. And then in the end, we have 100 towns that are still using the health officer system and another 150 that are using fire safety. And I read the amendment that went down last year as not really willing to take the deep dive of going to fire safety. It was gonna, and it wasn't even transitional. It was more like, we're gonna use the old system, but if the old system fails on an individual complaint, then the person has a right to go to fire safety. And, you know, all kinds of questions were raised. Well, how long do we have to wait for the town health officer to respond? Is the emergency nature of that gone away, or it's too late? It begged a lot of questions. And I guess at this point, I guess not surprising to you, I want to keep the core of the program the way it is. And maybe if you want to keep working on this as it goes through a house, I'm sure you have your supporters. I wouldn't say that if there was, I don't think there's a need to wait. But if the bottom line is we had to wait 6 months for people to adjust or something, but we wound up with the fire safety program that's in this bill, I might be open to it if it came back that way from the House. But
well, the point that I'm making is I'm not interested in reintroducing the same amendment that the Senate has already defeated. And I don't think there's any real point in doing that. However, I raised the question as to whether or not leaving it the way it is right now satisfies the governor's objections regarding that portion of the bill. And that, I think, is up to the committee to decide whether or not it satisfies. You believe it satisfies.
Right. And the answer is we don't know, but we're going to try. And
Okay.
so I appreciate that. That was a good conversation, very frank.
Yeah.
Senator Clarkson.
And thank you, Randy. I think it is a little transitional in a way because we're with this bill financing just one. We're financing the person in ACCD at DHCD to get this set up, get the tech set up, and with one additional person in fire safety. And we're it's sort of slightly transitional because we are not hiring the additional fire safety people until we have the fees in place and are being collected.
Well, I understand that. I mean, one of the issues that clearly is in the back of my mind is we don't know what the number of registrants is going to be. And I think I raised the issue that the more we add exceptions, the lower the number of registrants, and whether or not the number of registrants are going to produce the amount of money necessary to create the number of inspection positions that are necessary is still a question in the back of my mind. In the absence of data, we don't know that number. So that's something, if the bill goes forward as it is, it's something we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it gives us the opportunity. Yeah, absolutely. We're going to see what.
Like with any program, I mean, in all fairness, we don't know the number of registrants. We worked through the, could you hold on? Could we take, I need to do something. I'll be back in 1 minute, I promise.
And Randy, I think that the Rental Housing Advisory Board took a very, did a really good guesstimate, an informed guesstimate on the number. And, we have created some assumptions, but I don't think that enough to impact, but we'll have to find out.
Yep.
David, while we're waiting for Michael, can you, Randy, do you mind if I ask David a question?
Please go ahead.
David, on the units of owner-occupied residencies, can you just clarify how many you think your language is exempting? Because I had thought we had wanted to exempt an owner-occupied building that had two additional units other than the owner's unit. So it was a total of 3 units, that the owner's unit and then 2 additional ones. But here I'm seeing it as the owner's residence and 3 additional units. Can you just clarify which it is?
I read 5 to be tied to the number of units on the property. and
Okay,
that's
so it's
3 units total.
got it. Okay, so it's 3 units total, one of which is owner occupied.
Right.
So
You know,
it's,
there's a lot of, it's again, it's tied to the number of units, not to the number of buildings. I mean, it could be one building with 3 components or 3 separate buildings. The trigger is that there's no more than 3 units on the property and that the owner has to live in one of the units.
got it. Okay, thanks.
All right,
That-
so I know Senator Brock needs to leave in about 10 minutes. So I'm gonna try and move this
Five.
forward. What's that? 5?
Closer to
Okay, so I appreciate that, as I was saying, that, these are guesstimates. I think the number is going to depend as much on compliance and good faith by the landlords in the first few years than anything else. These exemptions, I don't think, are going to make a big hit in that. But I appreciate the thought. So let's move on. I think we're ready to vote. I just want to say that this bill has a ways to go as we learn more, perhaps, about how the governor feels. I think the majority of this committee liked the bill we passed last year. We've made some tweaks. I'm willing to make less or more tweaks depending upon what we learn, but that's the process. I think this bill, as passed last year and as to likely be amended this year, is a great bill. It's a long time in coming, and I think it's very important to health and safety of tenants, and also to make sure that buildings don't go into such bad shape that we lose this affordable housing that we have right now. So with that speech, I'd like to move my amendment to S210, and I'll just do a show of hands on that, please.
I'd like to say something quickly.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, any discussion? I'm sorry.
Well, just in agreeing with you, Mr. Chair, I'm getting used to in the Senate, we don't have as many people in just from the general public, but we, as folks may know, and, Chair and I share a district, Burlington had a very sad fire that killed 2 people in the fall. And it's incredibly devastating when something like that happens. We've seen situations, whether in the US or abroad, when it makes international news, when, a significant number of people die in a building related to a fire safety issue. So I just want to bring this back to the issue that we're talking about. It can start to feel really abstract, but, people knowing and understanding their rights and responsibilities around fire safety is a really, really big deal. And, something that we don't think about in our general daily lives enough until a tragedy strikes. So, I just want to ground us in how serious it can be. And if we are exempting, per the governor's other request, a lot of the very short-term rentals, which some of us had misgivings about, which Senator Clarkson, was right about for a lot of our, personal feelings, then I really think when we're talking about, consecutive rentals to folks, it's really important that we remember how important fire safety is for everyone's well-being and for our ability to be a welcoming state, that shows that we have safe places for people to live.
Absolutely. And
Thank you for that. So let me just interrupt before Senator Brock, have you left us or are you still with us?
because your hand is up. So if we vote the bill, your hand is still up, which is, we're appreciating, but you may not want it up for the whole voting sequence.
Senator Brock, are you with us?
I think he's gone to testify.
I am momentarily. I had a little emergency here. I had some windows, a storm window popped open.
Oh.
Oh, yikes.
Do you, I could rush this vote. Several other people want to speak, but I just want to clear before you leave. Would you object to the fact, if you're not here for the vote, to hold the vote open for you for the rest of the day? I think we've heard everything we're going to hear about this issue at this point.
That's great. That would be appreciated, because I do have to leave for the other appointment right now.
Okay,
So Randy, we were just showing hands for the amendment, for Michael's amendment, and we were wondering if your hand, which is up, your digital hand is up.
he wanted
It
to
is?
speak.
It is. And I was just thinking you may not want it up for the sequence of votes that we're about to have.
Just
I-
before you
I-
vote on my amendment, Senator Brock, it gets us closer to the governor's position.
Okay.
All
Whatever.
right, so it's amended 5-0. Does somebody want to make a motion to move the bill at this point?
I would move the bill
As
as
amended.
amended.
Okay, we're going to take a roll call on this one. Senator Ram Hinsdale, do you want to call the roll?
Yes, Scott, are you feeling ready with our system?
And does anybody want to say anything more? I always forget to.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I really appreciate Keisha's comments. I would say it's also not just fire. We've been battling a case in Bethel with just filth, just utter and complete filth, and we cannot move the dial on this. And we need, so it's a whole range. It's from bed bugs to fire to animals misuse of homes. And so it's the health and safety of Vermonters, and it's help for landlords as well. So it's for me, this is a win-win for everybody.
Okay. Senator Ballant.
Yes, so I also met with some pediatricians yesterday and was reminded that it also comes into play with mold in apartment buildings and how it affects kids' respiratory system. So long time in coming for this bill, and ready to support it.
Yeah,
Thank you
here.
very
Yeah.
Okay, looks like we lost Senator Brock, but we'll hold the vote open. So Senator Ram Hinsdale, can you call the roll?
Yes, Senator Ballant,
Yes.
Senator Clarkson.
Yes.
I skipped over Senator Brock, who we're holding the vote open for. Myself, Senator Ram Hinsdale, yes. Senator Sorokin.
Yes. Thank you all very much. We'll see where this goes. Really appreciate your support in sticking with this bill.
Mr.
So
Chair,
yes,
do you want to vote the whole bill?
we just did.
I thought you wanted a specific vote on the amendment.
We did
We
vote on the
did.
amendment 5-0 on a voice vote, on a hand raising thing. I think you had your hand up.
Oh, so
We did that very
so we did the whole
We did
bill.
the amendment, and then I moved the bill as amended.
Okay, sorry, I forgot which vote was the informal one. Okay, so we I remember raising my hand. We do more informal votes here than in GovOps. So that was amending the bill was an informal vote. Passing the bill as amended.
It wasn't informal. It was just a voice vote. That's all. It
Or a
counted.
hand.
Okay,
hand
should we
vote.
still list it as a 4-1-0?
I would tend to do that on a straw poll or on a hand vote. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you do record the amendment vote. And
Yeah.
then you both get recorded. It's just like doing a voice vote on the floor versus a roll call vote. It counts. We just did it quickly as a voice.
Well,
vote.
only when we submit the record for this, it's by individual. So we're either checking yes or no for each person. So
Everybody voted unanimously. If we have to do that, then you could check everybody, even Senator Brock
Right.
voted on that one.
okay, I missed that part. I just didn't see his hand. So okay, so the amendment, we can say yes for everyone, and this we're holding it open for Senator Brock, and then we're submitting Scott. So we'll wait, as you probably are aware. Okay.
I'm making things up a little bit too. So.
You can check. We'll talk to you, Scott, about this. My memory is unclear whether we record. I'm not sure we record all the votes to amend. It certainly, they don't appear in the calendar. That's for sure.
I have it recorded here, so if whatever we need to do after, we're fine.
We're good. I think we voted unanimously on the amendment, and we voted on a roll call, 4 zeros with 1 outstanding. It'll probably be negative. It'll be 4-1. We have the votes. We just didn't know how to report them in for sure. And we used to do it all the time last year. I just forgot how to do it, how we do
Well,
it.
and when we were able to do it just on paper, I was very creative as clerk and did, but it's less, there's less room for creativity now.
Yes, I appreciate being backed up by a fellow clerk because I put, voice vote and I just write it in, but I do think the secretary would like for us to be clear on the final amendment, what the actual vote is, and then the bill as amended.
We'll work it out. Folks from VDOL, welcome. We're going to take a 10-minute break. We ran over a little bit, and welcome back. Let's see what time it is now. So
Michael-
let's say 11:15. What? Yes.
Okay,
7 o'clock.
great. No, may I just,
You want to talk to me privately?
Yeah.
Okay. Why don't you give me a call? Okay.